should KM be a separate department or embedded in practice areas? Essentially, how, according to you, should the KM function be organized in a large law firm?
Well, first, I would say that if the law firm has the luxury of having a separate department, it definitely should be its own department. A lot of firms have tried having knowledge management be part of technology or be part of information services, the library. But I think KM knowledge management serves a very different function. It crosses over a lot of different aspects of a law firm, and so personally I believe it should definitely be its own department. There's also debate over whether it needs to be led by a lawyer. Some people believe that having someone outside the law brings a fresh perspective that can be helpful to getting lawyers to try to work in different ways. I personally think that the top person, the leader of the KM department, ought to be a lawyer. And I think that for a number of reasons, not the least of which is a person who comes from practice, has the experience of thinking like a lawyer and knowing what the challenges are that lawyers face in their day-to-day practice. And with that experience, you can focus your knowledge management efforts on addressing the biggest challenges that the lawyers have, and really designing things that will work well for the lawyers in their practice. The problem is someone, for example, like from IT, an information technology background, may be able to come up with good technologies that would be helpful, but wouldn't have the background and understanding to design those technologies in a way that really work for lawyers, and in a way that they can incorporate them into their day-to-day practice. The other reason I think it's important to have a lawyer leading the KM function is because lawyers tend to be a little skeptical, and if it's someone who doesn't have that background, when the practicing lawyers are asked to change their behavior, the first thing they will say is, "You don't understand how we work." And if you're someone who has come into the knowledge management profession with years of legal practice, you can say, "Well, no, actually I do know how you work, and I know it as well as you do, but here's how I think this can help you with your practice." So I think to have that trust from the lawyers and their buy-in for the different changes that you're trying to introduce, it's very important to be able to say, yes, I come from practice and I know exactly what you're dealing with. Whether you need people embedded in the individual practice groups, I think is a function of the law firm itself. So if you have a law firm with several different practice areas that are very different, each of those practice areas is going to have different needs. And so I think if the firm has enough financial resources to invest in building up a good knowledge management department, ideally you would have different practitioners, knowledge management practitioners embedded in the different practice groups. Because someone who's practicing, for example, litigation, which is my background, we have very different challenges and needs than a lawyer in a transactional practice or someone who practices real estate. And so to have lawyers who are very specialized, or knowledge management lawyers who are very specialized, embedded in those practice areas is very useful because they bring that experience. The people in that practice group will trust them, and they can really keep on top of changes in the law and be seen as a trusted advisor to that practice group. So for me, the perfect knowledge management department would be led by someone with years of practice experience. You would have individual former practicing lawyers embedded in each practice area as a knowledge management lawyer for your key practice areas. But then I think it's very important to have other non-lawyer professionals, and particularly someone who's very creative. I think it's important to have people who are good communicators. So I always look for people who, I would like one or two people who are very strong writers, creative thinkers, and people who can innovate. So I would have a couple writers, and I would also have a couple developers on my team. So someone with a technology background who could really come up with some interesting ways to design tools that will be useful to the lawyers. So to me, that's the ideal team.